just going back to why I've always been a huge fan of yours. As we know, I played for Scotland for 10 years, but I grew up at Leicester.
Yeah.
And watching England, I was in the England Academy with the likes of Danny Cipriani, James Haskell, Jim Skaysbrook from Bath, like a really good group. But watching England, what I remember from that is Jono, obviously Martin Johnson, and yourself singing the anthems, right? So the emotion that you wore on your face every time that you sang the national anthem. And this isn't saying that the English national anthem isn't that emotional, but some people might say it is compared to other ones. But I remember just watching you, Lol, singing the anthem, and I don't know, I was drawn to you, and I shouldn't have been because I was at Leicester with Martin Corrie, with John O'Neill back. Like, is that the Latino in you that wore your emotion so much on your sleeve?
Yeah, quite possibly. I mean, I'm my father's first generation Italian. My mother was East End Irish descent, so half Irish, half Italian makes you a very dangerous Englishman. And the one thing that I was confused about, I mean, I'm very English, I'm Anglo-Saxon. You look at me, you wouldn't say that I look Italian in any way. But
hell of a name, though.
It's, Lorenzo Bruno Nero Dallaglio.
Is that legit or not, or has that been made
No,
up
no,
over
no,
the years?
no,
That is.
No, it is legit. And you're all slightly embarrassed by your name when you're younger because, Tony Adams or John Smith sounds a bit more English, doesn't it, really? But obviously, it is my name. And I was always a bit confused because English people, British people, English people particularly, very conservative, maybe not outward displays of emotion. I used to get picked up from school. My mum and dad, never saw my dad that much because he was working, but my mum would, there'd always be an embrace. There'd always be quite a loving embrace, 2 kisses on the cheek were very normal in the Dallaglio household years ago. So outward displays of emotion were never a problem for us. In fact, they were encouraged. I guess it goes back to the reasons why I played rugby in the first place. I just getting straight to the point. I enjoyed sport. I was good at football. I think you really think you're good at football until you play against someone who's better, and then you go, maybe I'm not that good. I generally loved all sports, but I didn't excel necessarily in any one in particular. Rugby, as you would appreciate, only really gets exciting when someone passes you the ball.
I'm a bit different to you, Lawrence.
Well, you always found the ball a distraction.
Yeah, I did, yeah. I was a dummy runner.
In fact, if anyone passed you the ball, something went horribly wrong. Basically.
Exactly that, yeah. Generally, there was a laugh from my players and the crowd.
But, so listen, I just thought that... I wasn't necessarily destined to play rugby. And then, I had one of those life-changing moments that come to us all, but sadly happened to me very early in my life when I lost my sister very tragically in the Marchioness. 16 years of age she was 19. She was invited on a riverboat party, the Marchioness. I was sat around a table having dinner with her and my mum. I was invited to go with her. I decided not to. And she went out and never came home. And I woke up the next morning. My mum sort of, shook me out of bed. There was helicopters over above. God. And I sort of immediately thought, well, if she was very sensible, my sister, very unlike me. And I thought, there and then, well, if she hasn't come home, then she's, something's happened. She's dead. 51 people out of over 100 died that night. And listen, as you can imagine, that is a catastrophic, seismic thing to happen in your life at any stage. It is even, when it's so sudden that someone is there and then they're not. As you can imagine, it took a couple of years for me to even start to process that.
And you were 16 at the time?
16, yeah. And look, I was playing sport. I was doing okay. I went back to school. I was at Ampleforth. Things didn't work out, quite understandably. Everyone likes to think that I was, expelled or asked to leave, but clearly mentally I wasn't in the right place to even be at school. So I did leave in the lower sixth, and I was wandering around making some terrible decisions, getting myself into all sorts of trouble, understanding the whole reason of why this had happened, why me, why us, why her, etc., etc. And then my parents were in a really difficult place. My mum and dad, as you can imagine, we have children, you and I now, so the thought of burying one of your own children is you just don't even think about. So, and then I got to about 1990, the end of 1990, and I thought, right, I need to sort my shit out because, my life is definitely heading in the wrong direction. And I remember that I enjoyed playing rugby at Ampleforth, and I thought, I know, I'll join a rugby club. And it was literally as much as that. And I wanted to do it because I needed, this sounds all quite deep, but it is deep, really. I needed a family, I needed a community, I needed a sense of purpose, I needed a sense of belonging. And I needed to do something to make my parents proud and to try and bring them a bit closer together. So I joined a rugby club. It was as simple as that. I say it laughing, jokingly. I lived quite close to Harlequins. In those days, I didn't really fancy that shirt too much, if I'm honest with you. I don't know what it was. I wasn't drawn to it in any way whatsoever. I always thought rugby shirts should just be plain, really, black or blue.
Or just black.
Or just black, whatever it might be. I actually lived closest to Rosslyn Park, and I thought about joining them. And then I realised that they were just about to get relegated from National Division 1. And I opened the newspaper, and I think it was I looked at the Courage League, and Wasps were top of the table, and that's where I went. I went there. I had no idea where I was going or what I was joining, and I came from a school that had about 20 odd rugby pitches, and I walked into a rugby club that had 2, barely fit for purpose. But the feeling I got when I walked in there was exactly what I needed. No one asked me any questions. No one, asked me where I'd come from, what had happened. They just embraced me as they would do in any rugby club, actually. It just felt right. I needed someone to put their arms around me. That's exactly what I got. And slowly but surely, I started to play, and my mum and dad would come and watch me, and there was a sort of purpose to it, really, because every Saturday they'd have a game to come and watch, and it would start. I mean, it didn't happen overnight, but it would start to put a smile on their face. So just fast forwarding, when you talk about the anthem, what that was for me was a real purpose to why I played rugby. And every time I sang the anthem, the reason I got very emotional, obviously I'm quite patriotic, but equally it was more to do with the fact that it made me think about my sister, made me think about the reasons why I played the game, and it made me pretty driven. And therefore, as my role in rugby evolved and I started to become much more of a sort of a leader in the group, I'd be in a changing room, and I can't tell other rugby players how to play better. Most of them were better than me anyway, technically and tactically, etc. But what I was able to do somehow was or I felt I could do, and where I could really add value, was by finding the right emotional touch points in people and connecting them. Because rugby is very technical, as we know. It's very tactical. Sometimes people make it a bit more tactical than it needs to be. But it's also about emotion, and it's about the head and the heart. And I've talked about this a lot, and I think if you can connect the two things together, then it becomes very powerful. And that's why you see in rugby teams that maybe on paper and financially don't look that strong, beating sides that are technically far more gifted than they are, because they're able to tap into the right emotional connection. So I made it very clear, the reasons to everyone else around me, why I played the game and what it meant to me and why I was driven by it. And I would always ask other people to question why they're in the room, and why are we all here together, united? Are we here for a purpose, or are we here to kill a bit of time? So yeah, it's been a fascinating journey, and not a lot of people know about that.